From the moment I drew my first breath, I was an unwelcome surprise, a child born into a family that had already decided its favorite story. My parents were in their late 40s when I arrived, and by then, they had already cast their leading role. Emily, my golden sister, 10 years older than me, perfect in every way. I wasn't planned for. I was an afterthought, a footnote to their lives. The weight of this reality pressed down on me daily. But it wasn't just the absence of affection, was the constant reminders. Emily also got straight A's. My mother would say casually as she flipped through my report card, her tone indifferent despite my glowing grades. It wasn't enough that I worked tirelessly to excel at school. No matter what I achieved, there was always Emily's shadow looming over me, larger than life. Once, during a family dinner where relatives gathered around the table, I tried to share my excitement about winning a regional math competition. But before I could even finish my sentence, the conversation shifted seamlessly to Emily's plans to study at Harvard. Everyone leaned in with rapt attention while I sat silently, my words evaporating into thin air like smoke. That night I cried myself to sleep, clutching my trophy, the only acknowledgement I received. But perhaps the cruelest blow came when I broke my leg, playing outside one summer afternoon. I remember lying on the grass, tears streaming down my face as pain shot through my body. My father carried me inside, but instead of rushing me to the hospital, he called Grandma and Grandpa. "We're busy tonight," he muttered into the phone, his voice devoid of urgency. Busy doing what? Watching Emily perform at yet another piano recital. She hadn't even placed in the competition, but her performance apparently mattered more than my broken bones. For hours, I lay alone in agony until my grandparents arrived, their faces etched with worry. They rushed me to the emergency room, holding my hands tightly as the doctor set my leg. My parents showed up hours later, long after the worst was over, bringing flowers and empty apologies. "You know how important this is for your sister," my mother said softly, almost as if she believed those words could erase the sting of neglect. It wasn't just the big moments, it was the small ones too. Every birthday party, every holiday gathering, every milestone felt like a stage built exclusively for Emily. And I was relegated to the wings, watching from afar, invisible unless someone needed something from me. These weren't isolated incidents, they formed a pattern, a relentless drumbeat of rejection that echoed throughout my childhood. Yet, amidst all the heartache, I clung to one truth: I deserved better. Even then, deep inside, I knew I was worth more than being treated as an afterthought. This belief became the ember that fueled my journey toward independence and, ultimately, redemption. From the very beginning, my grandparents were more than just caregivers. They were my lifeline, my emotional anchor in a world that often made me feel invisible. While my parents saw me as an afterthought, my grandparents saw me for who I truly was. A bright, capable child, deserving of love and respect. Their house wasn't just a refuge. It was where I learned to believe in myself when no one else seemed to. One evening, after another dismissive comment from my mother about how Emily had always been the better daughter, I broke down in tears. My grandfather pulled me into his arms, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Madison," he said firmly, "never let anyone make you doubt your worth, not even your own family." Those words became etched into my soul, a mantra I would carry with me through every challenge life threw at me. But perhaps the moment that solidified their role as my true parents came on a stormy night when I was 9 years old. The rain pounded against the windows like angry fists, and I lay shivering under a thin blanket, my forehead burning with fever. My parents were out attending yet another event, celebrating Emily's achievements, a piano recital or some other milestone I can't quite remember. All I knew was that they weren't there when I needed them most. I called out weakly for help, but the house felt eerily empty, save for the distant hum of the television left on in the living room. Desperate, I dialed my grandparents' number, my small hands trembling as I pressed the buttons. Within minutes, my grandmother burst through the door, her face pale with worry. She took one look at me and immediately called my grandfather, who arrived shortly after, already dressed in his coat and boots, despite the late hour. They bundled me up carefully, shielding me from the biting cold and pelting rain, and rushed me to the hospital. The doctor later told them I had a high fever that could have led to serious complications if untreated. But instead of scolding me for being careless or complaining about the inconvenience, my grandparents stayed by my side all night, taking turns holding my hand and whispering words of comfort. My grandmother sang softly, her voice soothing like a lullaby, while my grandfather read stories aloud until dawn broke over the horizon. That night wasn't just about survival, it was a turning point. It showed me what unconditional love looked like. Unlike my parents, who only seemed to notice me when I failed to meet their expectations, my grandparents celebrated my strengths and nurtured my potential. They taught me resilience, showing me that even in moments of despair, there is strength to be found. And it wasn't just emotional support, they also instilled in me a deep appreciation for knowledge. My grandfather, a retired math professor, spent countless hours teaching me about numbers, saying things like, "Numbers never lie. They tell stories more honest than people do." Meanwhile, my grandmother helped me with schoolwork, reminding me gently, "Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take away from you." Looking back, I realized that without my grandparents, I might not have survived those early years, not just physically, but emotionally. Their unwavering belief in me gave me the courage to dream bigger than the confines of my troubled home. Even now, decades later, I can still hear my grandfather's voice echoing in my mind. Sometimes the best things in life aren't planned. Little did I know then how prophetic those words would become, shaping the course of my journey toward independence and self-worth. By the time I reached high school, my role in the family had been firmly cemented. I was the invisible child, the one who existed to serve. While Emily basked in the spotlight of my parents' unwavering adoration, I became their silent housekeeper, a shadow flitting through the corners of our home, unseen and unappreciated. The weight of this reality grew heavier with each passing year, but nothing prepared me for the quiet cruelty that unfolded during my teenage years. It wasn't just neglect anymore, it was calculated sacrifice, as if my needs were an afterthought they could afford to discard without guilt. One particularly harsh memory stands out. When Emily announced she needed a new dress for her senior prom, a glittering gown that cost more than my monthly allowance, my parents didn't hesitate to make cuts elsewhere. Overnight, my breakfast budget disappeared. "You can manage," my mother said dismissively, when I asked about it, her tone implying that hunger was a small price to pay for Emily's perfection. And so, I learned to survive on scraps, sneaking bites from leftovers at my grandparents' house or skipping meals altogether. Some mornings I'd sit in class with my stomach growling so loudly, I feared the entire room could hear it. Hunger became a constant companion, gnawing not only at my body but also at my spirit. Yet, I never complained, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew no one would listen. But perhaps the most humiliating moment came when Mrs. Peterson, my strict algebra teacher, called me out in front of the entire class for forgetting to bring my homework. "Madison," she snapped, holding up the empty space where my assignment should have been, "this isn't like you. What's going on?" Her voice carried both frustration and concern, but all I could do was stare at the floor, cheeks burning with shame. The truth was, I hadn't forgotten, it had been impossible to finish. The night before, I'd spent hours hand-washing my father's work shirts and Emily's delicate blouses, scrubbing until my fingers turned raw while the clock ticked mercilessly toward midnight. By the time I finally collapsed into bed, exhausted, there was no energy left to tackle the equations waiting silently in my notebook. At home, my efforts went unnoticed, or worse, taken for granted. My father would glance at the neatly folded laundry piled on the dining table and mutter, "About time. Your sister always did hers without complaining." Each word felt like a dagger, twisting deeper with every careless remark. Meanwhile, Emily floated through life untouched by such burdens, her days filled with rehearsals for piano recitals and shopping trips for yet another dress she claimed she needed. She wasn't cruel, she simply didn't see me. To her, I was furniture, something present but irrelevant. Yet, even in those dark moments, I found strength in the lessons my grandparents had instilled in me. Their voices echoed in my mind whenever despair threatened to overwhelm me. Asterisk numbers never lie, my grandfather would say, reminding me that logic and perseverance could conquer any challenge. My grandmother's words followed close behind. Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take away from you. So, I poured myself into my studies, determined to prove my worth not to them, but to myself. Every late night spent solving math problems under dim lighting. Every essay written amidst the hum of the washing machine became acts of defiance against a world that tried to diminish me. Looking back, I realized now that these hardships weren't just obstacles, they were the fire that forged my resilience. They taught me that survival isn't just about enduring pain, it's about finding power within it. And though I couldn't see it then, those sleepless nights and empty stomachs were laying the foundation for something greater. A future where I would no longer be defined by what others thought I deserved. The day I graduated from college felt like the culmination of every sacrifice I had ever made. Every late night spent studying while scrubbing dishes or folding laundry. It was my victory, not theirs. But even in that moment of triumph, my parents found a way to dim the light of my achievement. When I called to share the news that I had accepted an offer from one of the most prestigious investment banks on Wall Street, their response wasn't pride, it was criticism. "Madison," my mother said with a sigh heavy enough to crush me, "you should have chosen something more stable. Why chase these far-fetched dreams? What happens if this doesn't work out?" Her words stung, not because they carried any truth, but because they revealed just how little faith she had in me. They didn't understand then, perhaps never would, that stability wasn't what I craved. I wanted freedom. Freedom from their constant judgment. Freedom from being treated as disposable. My first few years in the corporate world were anything but smooth sailing. The cutthroat environment of high finance tested every ounce of resilience I had built over decades. Early on, I became a target for jealous colleagues who saw my rapid ascent as a threat. One particular incident still burns in my memory. A senior analyst deliberately sabotaged one of my presentations by withholding critical data until moments before the meeting. As I stood there, staring at the glaring gaps in my report, panic clawed at my chest. But then something inside me clicked. A lesson whispered by my grandfather years ago echoed in my mind. Asterisk numbers tell stories more honest than people do. Drawing on sheer determination and razor-sharp analytical skills, I improvised, weaving together fragments of information into a narrative so compelling that even the harshest critics nodded in approval. That day I proved not only to them but also to myself that I belonged. But surviving office politics was only half the battle. There were days when the weight of expectations felt suffocating, when emails piled up faster than I could answer them, and deadlines loomed like storm clouds. Yet, each challenge pushed me further, sharpening my instincts and honing my leadership abilities. By the time I turned 30, I had risen through the ranks to become one of the youngest senior managers in the firm's history. My name began appearing in industry publications, and invitations to exclusive networking events poured in. Every accolade felt like a silent rebuttal to my parents' doubts, a reminder that I had carved out success despite their lack of belief in me. Still, the journey wasn't without its scars. Late nights blurred into early mornings, and the line between personal life and professional ambition grew dangerously thin. Some weekends, I barely left my desk, surviving on coffee and sheer willpower. Friends drifted away, unable to keep pace with my relentless drive. Loneliness crept in, but I reminded myself of the lessons my grandparents taught me. Knowledge is power, and perseverance conquers all. Slowly, I transformed that loneliness into fuel, channeling it into decisions that earned me respect within the industry. Looking back now, I realize that climbing the ladder wasn't just about proving my worth, it was about reclaiming control over my life. In those boardrooms, surrounded by men twice my age, I finally understood what my grandfather meant when he said, "Sometimes the best things in life aren't planned." For once, I wasn't an afterthought. I was the architect of my destiny. And nothing, not my parents' disapproval, not my rivals' schemes, could take that away from me. When I first told my parents about my plan to buy them a new house, their initial reaction was one of overwhelming gratitude. My mother clasped her hands together, tears welling up in her eyes, and said, "Madison, we never thought you'd do something like this for us." For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps this gesture would finally mend the fractured relationship between us. that it might serve as a bridge to close the chasm years of neglect had created. But as it turned out, their gratitude wasn't directed at me. It was aimed squarely at what they could gain from my success. Within days, I overheard snippets of conversations between them and Emily, discussing how they would move into the house and, more alarmingly, how Emily and her family would join them. Not once did anyone think to consult me, the person who had sacrificed so much to make this possible. The betrayal stung deeper than I ever anticipated. I had envisioned this home as a fresh start for all of us, a chance to rewrite our family's narrative, to replace resentment with reconciliation. Instead, it became yet another battleground, where I was treated as an outsider in my own life. Weeks passed without any formal invitation to the housewarming party, though vague promises were made during phone calls. "We're still planning," my father assured me, his tone dismissive. "You know these things take time." Meanwhile, social media told a different story. One evening, after another evasive conversation with my mother, I found myself scrolling through Facebook and stumbled upon Emily's page. There it was, a post announcing the upcoming housewarming celebration, complete with photos of caterers setting up and decorations being arranged. The caption read, "Can't wait to celebrate this beautiful new chapter with everyone." Hundreds of comments poured in, congratulating my parents on their hard-earned achievement. On the day of the party, I parked a block away from the house, my heart pounding like a war drum. Through the windows, I watched as dozens of guests mingled inside, laughing and sipping champagne. My father stood proudly in the living room, regaling a group of friends with tales of their supposed financial discipline. "After all these years of saving, we finally bought our dream home," he declared, his voice dripping with pride. My mother chimed in, her pearl necklace glinting under the twinkling lights. "And Emily helped so much with the down payment. Such a wonderful daughter, always thinking about family first. Unlike some people." Her words hit me like a slap across the face. Unlike some people. As if I hadn't spent decades proving my worth, only to be dismissed yet again. I slipped through the side door unnoticed, my pulse racing. Standing in the doorway, I cleared my throat loudly enough to silence the entire room. "Actually," I began, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me, "I think there's been a misunderstanding here." All eyes turned to me, wide with shock. My father forced a tight smile. "Madison? What a surprise. Especially since you forgot to invite yourself to the housewarming party." His attempt at humor fell flat. Ignoring him, I continued, "This house isn't yours. It belongs to me. I never signed it over to you." Gasps rippled through the crowd as I held up the deed, my hands trembling but resolute. My mother's face flushed red with indignation. "How dare you humiliate us like this? You're selfish, Madison. Always thinking about money instead of family." Her accusation hung in the air, sharp and venomous, but I refused to let it pierce me. This wasn't about money, it was about respect. And in that moment, I realized that no amount of generosity would ever earn me the love and acknowledgement I craved from them. Their betrayal wasn't just about the house. It was the culmination of a lifetime of favoritism, lies, and emotional manipulation. With every fiber of my being, I knew what I had to do next. The moment I stepped into the living room, holding the folder containing the ownership documents and deed to the house, the air seemed to crackle with tension. My father's voice trailed off mid-sentence as he realized I was there, standing in the doorway like an uninvited specter at their grand celebration. For years, they had treated me as if I didn't exist unless it suited them now. Here I was, ready to shatter the illusion they had so carefully constructed for their guests. "Actually," I began, my voice cutting through the hum of conversation like a blade, "I think there's been some confusion about who owns this house." Silence fell over the room, thick and suffocating, as all eyes turned to me. My mother's face flushed crimson, her lips trembling before she found her voice. "Madison," she shrieked, her tone laced with desperation and disbelief. "Are you really trying to destroy this family? After everything we've done for you?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with accusation, but they no longer carried the sting they once did. Instead, they felt hollow, a desperate attempt to manipulate me one last time. I met her gaze steadily, my expression unwavering. "This family," I said, my voice calm but firm, has never existed for me. My father, ever the patriarch clinging to his fragile sense of authority, stepped forward. His usual commanding presence wavered under the weight of embarrassment and anger. That's enough, Madison, he snapped, his voice rising above the murmurs of shocked guests. You're ruining this party. If anyone should leave, it's you. He gestured toward the door, as though he still believed he held power over me. But I wasn't the same girl who had spent her childhood scrubbing floors and biting back tears, while Emily basked in their adoration. I smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in it. This is my house, I replied, enunciating each word with icy precision. If anyone wants to leave, by all means they're welcome to go. The room erupted into chaos. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to intervene or flee. Emily's husband hovered near the edge of the crowd, visibly uncomfortable, while my sister's self-assured smirk faltered. She stammered, "You can't just take this away from us. You bought it for Mom and Dad's, there's now—" Her words dripped with entitlement, but I didn't flinch. Pulling out the official papers, I held them up for everyone to see. "No, it's not," I said, my voice ringing clear. "I never signed it over to them. This house belongs to me, and clearly, that's something none of you are prepared to accept." My mother lunged toward me, her hands clutching at the pearls around her neck, as though they might anchor her to sanity. "How dare you do this to your own family?" she cried, her voice breaking. "We're your parents. We gave you life." Her plea was meant to wound, to guilt me into submission, but instead, it only solidified my resolve. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the woman who had birthed me, but the person who had ignored my worth for decades. "You may have given me life," I said softly, "but my grandparents gave me love. They taught me what family truly means, and it's not about blood. It's about respect, support, and unconditional care, something none of you have ever shown me." With that, I addressed the stunned crowd. "I'm sorry to interrupt your evening, but this party is over. Please, everyone, feel free to leave." And just like that, the facade crumbled. One by one, guests filed out, muttering apologies or avoiding eye contact altogether. As the door clicked shut behind the last visitor, I stood alone in the silence, surrounded by half-empty glasses and discarded plates. The house, which had once symbolized hope for reconciliation, now felt like a tombstone marking the end of any connection I'd clung to with my family. The fallout from that fateful housewarming party rippled through my life like an earthquake, leaving behind a landscape forever altered. In the days that followed, Emily's messages began flooding my phone, each one more desperate and accusatory than the last. "How could you be so cruel?" she wrote in one particularly venomous text. "You owe this family an apology." Her words dripped with indignation, as though I were the villain in some twisted fairy tale where favoritism reigned supreme. But her anger didn't sting not anymore. Instead, it felt hollow, like the echo of a drumbeat long silenced. Without hesitation, I deleted her message, along with every other attempt they made to reach me. Their guilt trips and manipulative pleas no longer had power over me. For the first time in my life, I felt free. A year passed, and the world moved on, but not without consequences for those who had once treated me as disposable. One crisp autumn afternoon, I ran into Rachel, an old friend from high school, at a cafe downtown. Over steaming cups of coffee, she caught me up on everything I'd missed. "Your parents are struggling," she said hesitantly, her brow furrowing with concern. "Emily and James lost their jobs again, and now all 5 of them are crammed into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment. They've been selling furniture just to make ends meet." She paused, searching my face for any sign of regret or remorse. But instead of feeling pity, I found myself smiling faintly, a bittersweet acknowledgement of the truth I had always known. "That's what happens when you live off someone else's generosity," I replied coolly. "Dependence has its price." Rachel looked taken aback by my detachment, but I wasn't being callous. If anything, I felt a strange sense of vindication, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because their struggles validated everything my grandparents had taught me about self-reliance and accountability. My parents had spent decades enabling Emily's entitled behavior. shielding her from the harsh realities of life, while ignoring my quiet resilience. Now, the weight of their choices had finally come crashing down on them. And yet, despite the satisfaction of seeing karma deliver its verdict, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness, not for them, but for the relationships we never truly had. The bond between siblings, the unconditional love of parents, these were things I had yearned for my entire life, only to realize too late that they had never existed in the first place. Determined to channel my emotions into something meaningful, I decided to sell the house, the same house that had become a symbol of betrayal and heartbreak. But rather than letting the money sit idle in a bank account, I invested it into a project close to my heart, a charity aimed at supporting underprivileged children. Growing up, I had often dreamed of escaping the suffocating confines of my childhood home. Now, I wanted to give others the chance to break free from their own cycles of neglect and hardship. As I signed the final paperwork, I thought back to all the nights I had spent studying under dim lighting, fueled by dreams of a better future. Those kids deserved the same opportunities I had fought so hard to create for myself, to know that they mattered, even if the people around them failed to see it. This is for every child who's ever felt invisible, I whispered to myself as I handed over the check. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very house which had caused so much pain would now serve as a beacon of hope for others. It was poetic justice, in a way, and a fitting end to a chapter one was more than ready to close. As I walked away from the building that day, I felt lighter, as though I had shed the last remnants of the past that had clung to me for so long. My grandparents' lessons echoed in my mind. Sometimes the best things in life aren't planned. For years I had carried the weight of their absence, drawing strength from the memories of their love and wisdom. Now, I realized that their legacy lived on not just in me, but in the lives I hoped to touch. Love, respect, and support, those were the pillars of a true family. And as I stepped into this new phase of my life, I vowed to build a future rooted in those values. The cycle of conditional affection and emotional manipulation ended here. From now on, I would define my own path, one built on authenticity, independence, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserves to be seen, valued, and loved.